Welcome to Titans of Transition with my special guest, Dave Gambrill, digital marketing mentor and the host of the podcast, Unleash Your Awesome. Hey, Dave Gambrill, welcome to Titans of Transition today.
What's up, Joe? Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
Oh, I am too. I know there'll be a lot of people tuning in who already are aware of your digital marketing mentorship offerings and Facebook group and various other things. I'm really excited to have a discussion with you about your transitions, which I think are a pretty powerful story, really, that many people go through. I don't want to give it all away, but you were a corporate America kind of guy, right?
Yeah, I was locked into that thing, following the path that your parents put you on and doing okay with it. But yeah, I got to a point where I figured out it wasn't really what I was supposed to be doing on this planet. And it was kind of a circuitous route to get there, but we can chat about that.
What was your lane? What area did you work in?
What area didn't I work in? So I did a little bit in technology recruiting. From there, I went to professional sports and I worked in minor league baseball. And then I worked in major leagues for the Philadelphia Flyers and 76ers and pretty much anything that went on at those arenas there, which could have been the circus or concerts or whatever. So that was a really fun experience. And then I went from there to selling drugs out of the back of my car.
Oh boy. What kind of drugs?
Yeah, pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
After about, 12 years or so. And then kind of moved into my leadership development lane, which is where I came across you. And then in that is where I was doing a lot of stuff online before it was popular to put a lot of that stuff online. And people were asking me how I was doing it. And I would usually schedule calls with them. And then it got to the point where I just couldn't do one-on-one anymore and I had to scale it. And that's how some of my Facebook group and my podcast and some other things came about, because I was getting a lot of the same questions from people in different spheres of influence, actually. And I wanted to figure out a way to serve them in a way that was scalable for me and would allow me to live a life of what I wanted to do without being tied to helping people 24/7.
So you ripped through a number of different things you did, which were quite varied, but I guess had a lot of commonality in kind of the way you're wired, I imagine. But was there a moment when you said to yourself, I got to go all in on this and leave the other stuff behind? Or was it really gradual? I mean, I'm just kind of curious about what that transition was like for you.
Yeah. So I was doing this growth process. My dad, the situation wasn't great. I remember getting one of those situations when I was like 15 or 16, when I was essentially, quote, grounded for life. I don't remember what I did to earn that, but my dad basically said, you can come out of your room when you give me a book report on how to win friends and influence people by Dale Carnegie. So he put that book in my hands, and that was kind of my personal growth beginning, which I did it begrudgingly, obviously, as a teenager, but I saw some value in that. And so I continued to kind of do that through all of those different phases I was talking about. I was reading books by John Maxwell and, Earl Nightingale, listening to those cassettes and things like that, Jim Rohn, and just putting a steady stream of that in throughout all of my life, really. And as I was moving and going through these different things, what I had figured out was Jim Rohn talks about work on yourself harder than you work on your job. And not saying to not work on your job, right? Work hard on your job and be the best person you could be for your employer. But if you continue to work on your skills and your talents and your abilities, then you'll be more marketable in the next thing. And that's why it was so easy for me to make a transition from this thing to that thing, because I was working on my communication skills, my selling skills, my marketing skills, my networking skills, all the while. And I kind of kept that top of mind. So when I was taking on new opportunities or new challenges or moving from one thing to the next, a lot of it had to do with obviously money and paying the bills and things like that, because I had a growing family at the time. Well, I mean, I still have a family, but they were little. And somehow I didn't always chase the dollar. I had this idea of like I needed to do the next thing that was right for me, not just right for my budget or my wallet or whatever. So that was kind of going on all the time. And I guess the biggest transition was when I finally decided I was going to go off and do my own thing, moving from corporate America in a pharmaceutical sales job where I was getting paid a lot of money. I had a company car and a pension. Some of your listeners probably don't even know what a pension is. A 401k with matching, really good dental and medical benefits, crazy. And everybody that I talked to that said, you're going to do what? Like,
I know. They think you're crazy, right?
Yeah, you're crazy. I got that a million times. And people, like my parents were like, well, we support you and all, but like, are you sure?
You really want to think this through?
Yeah. So I got a lot of that But right in between that spot, I had another personal growth thing. That's why, I gave you a 4-minute answer to a 10-second question. I was doing this thing with Simon Sinek, the guy that wrote Start With Why and his, TED Talk, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. I was doing a deep dive. I was helping his team launch like a beta of his course. It was Start With Why. It's like a deep dive. So I was doing it with some mutual friends that we know through John Maxwell and going through this course. And what it was doing was like helping me understand what my gifts and strengths really are, my talents. And I've done strength finders and DISC and all these other assessments. But through this thing, we had to work with partners, and then we had to essentially, in corporate terms, come up with our own mission statement and our own, pillars of excellence and stuff like that. I don't remember exactly what he called them, but that's kind of what it was like. And what I figured out through that entire process, what I distilled was what I really like to do and what I'm really good at in this life is helping people unleash their awesome, which became the name of my podcast eventually. But whether it was coaching my kids or when I was in pharmaceutical sales, helping my physicians understand the different products that I have and how they could get better outcomes for their patients, whether it was working in corporate America doing advertising sales for, the big sports teams and saying, listen, I can get you the exposure that you're looking for your company in order to help you drive revenue or conversions or whatever you're trying to do. So for me, what it came down to was I liked helping people take the next big step or have success in whatever it is they were trying to do. And then once I figured that out, I was like, okay. And that's definitely a marketable thing. You just have to figure out what niche you want to do it in. But that was a moment where I thought, okay, it's time. Like it's time for me to go figure out how to do this on a bigger scale.
Yeah. So you're getting some external validation, right? People were coming to you and they were getting positive results. And so that was sort of a validation. I want to kind of swing back to and talk a little bit about gaining skills versus having sort of a natural gift for something. And a lot of commonality, selling, promoting. You were doing that from a very early age in everything you did. I think you mentioned that you realized that you needed to really lean into that and it would pay you benefits in anything you would do from there on out. So there is skill development, but there's also natural ability or natural gifting. And yes, you can become skilled at something, but my view, I'll get your opinion on this. My view is, yes, you can be successful, you develop skills in a lot of things, but you may have to work really hard at it versus going with your natural giftings. How does that play in?
Yeah, I agree with that. People will pay for world class. And if you're not really good at something, it's going to be really hard for you to be world class. So if you're already good at something and you could work on that and make that world class, then people will pay for it. I think that the difference for me and the little trick, so here's your first little takeaway, audience, is if you can combine two things that aren't usually combined, and whether it's a skill, a niche, or a skill and like a problem and the way it's solved, and maybe you solve it differently. So for me, I did strength finders and I figured out woo is one of my things, winning others over and whatever. They have some word for networking or connecting people. And I kind of figured I was good at that. And then that was some validation that I was good at that. And then as I did more of that, what I started to figure out, and I know from your corporate background, I got really good at being able to translate and synthesize through my pharmaceutical background, really complex information and synthesize it into very bite-sized, nuggets that people could digest easily. And I was like, oh, so I could take this digital marketing stuff, this online marketing, and basically translate it to any audience, including like a leadership training audience, people who are speakers, trainers, coaches, consultants who really don't focus on A, the marketing piece, and B, the technical or the digital side of marketing. So you already have the digital marketing pieces combined, but then you have these people that are used to standing in front of a classroom and facilitating or being on a stage and doing all these things, but they don't really know the first thing about converting that to the digital landscape. So I basically combined those three kind of things because a lot of people thought digital marketing was just being on social media. I'm like, no, there's actually some methodology behind the marketing piece. And then you can put the social media piece on it and obviously build your email list, which I talk about all the time. But then when I brought that to an audience that wasn't familiar with it, and I could also speak their language, which I think is important, I could use, metaphors and similes and examples and stuff that helps translate it to them. And all of them were like, oh, now I get it. So it was like, yeah, I stayed in my strength zone, and there's some things that I wasn't as good at, but instead of figuring out how to do it better, I just figured out who I could outsource it to, or which tools I might be able to use to not have to worry about it. Just let the tools do it for me.
Right. And that's a big area for you. I know you add a lot of value, answer a lot of questions to your community about comparing different tools. And I remember a conversation we had a year or so ago where you basically said, well, it kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish, which was great. It was great, even though I have a lot of that sort of strategic viewpoint in my background. Without saying that, you say those kinds of things to people from all different kinds of backgrounds. So it's a big value add to make sure they don't spin their wheels on something that may look real shiny, but not really going to accomplish their end goal.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't even know what they're trying to do.
Right.
They're like, okay, I'm here and I want to get there. And I say, okay, have you looked at a map of, what the terrain looks like? And they're like, no. I'm like, so how could you choose the vehicle that would get you there, right? If you got to go off-road and stuff and you're going to try to do it on a pair of roller skates, probably not going to get there, right? So it's, helping people understand where they are, where they're trying to go, and then say, okay, let's figure out what that looks like and what part of it could you do? And then what part of it should you maybe outsource to either other people or tools or systems or something?
Okay, so let's pivot a little bit because I think this would be interesting to delve into. You obviously interact with a lot of different people and various different journeys, and you just brought something up about this whole idea of not having clarity about direction, and vision for where they want to go. So in my coaching experience as well, I know you coach as well, but in my coaching background, I spent a fair amount of time talking to people about this and about what their vision is for their life and where they want to end up. And they contact me because they just have this sense of lack of clarity and something's not working. And they're reaching for things they're hearing to provide a solution without doing that deeper work on solution to what. And so I'm just kind of curious what part of that you see in individuals you coach and work with that is conditioned in them, that they're fighting that conditioning and that mindset, and what part of it is something else?
It's mindset predominantly. You've heard me say this a lot, and I teach off of this framework of mindset, skill set, tool set. It doesn't matter if you have the skills, and it doesn't matter if you have the tools. If your mindset's not right, you're not going to do any of it. And even if you've become world class, which we've seen recently in the last 2 Olympics, unfortunately, people that are very skilled at what they were doing. And at one time, their mindset was locked on and they had the skills and they had the talent and they won gold medals and did all kinds of amazing things. But in these last 2 Olympics that we've seen, world-class athletes who got a little sideways in their mind and their mindset was not right, they couldn't even compete. They were crashing into gates on the ski thing and, were afraid for their own safety on the gymnastics scene. So, that's just more proof, unfortunately, negative side of it, but that you got to get that mindset right. So it doesn't really matter what they're trying to do. A lot of people look at this backwards. They say like, I'm going to buy the tool. They don't say this or articulate it, but this is what they're thinking. I'm going to buy the tool and it's going to solve all the problems. And I'm like, well, do you know what those problems are? So we start looking backwards and they're like, nah, I don't even know what the problems are. I'm like, do you even know what you're trying to do? And they're like, nah, I don't even really know what I'm trying to do. I want to live the laptop lifestyle or whatever. I'm like, okay, wait, so let's stop for a second. And I teach off this framework, which I haven't shared publicly, I don't think very often. I use this thing called VS4T, right? It stands for vision, strategy, tactics, team, tools, telemetry. I think I got them right. That's 4 T's, right? So if they don't understand what their big kind of vision, what it is they're trying to do, so that might be the laptop lifestyle. Okay, so how are you going to do that? What's the strategy? What are you going to teach, or what, tactics, or what's the overarching strategy? Are you going to grow market share? Are you going to steal market share from somebody? What niche are you going to be in? And then the tactics piece of, okay, so what are the daily things? What are the daily activities you could be doing, or the weekly or the monthly benchmarks, that you could be looking at to make that happen? And then the next 2, you can change team and tools. If you're an entrepreneur moving to an entrepreneur, you're probably not going to have a big team. So you can have tools there instead of a team. So if you pick the right tools to help you manage your projects or do whatever it is you're trying to do, that's helpful. If you're a little bit bigger and you're going to bring on a team, then I recommend you start bringing on some team first before you decide the tools, because some of those team members can help you with what tools you might want to use. And then the telemetry just happens to be a fancy word that starts with T that fits in my little thing there of what kind of dashboards do you have set up? What kind of measurement things, almost like remote measurement things set up that you could just see on a daily basis to say, I'm on track. That leads you back to whatever that grand vision is and the strategy and the tactics and all that stuff. So each day you can kind of have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. And so when I share that with people, it just like blows their mind because I never thought about the steps of it. And obviously the mindset and the skill set and the tool set piece of it all fits in there too, especially when I'm talking about vision, strategy, and their mindset and all that jazz. But I think what it comes down to, when people are going to make these transitions, you're one of two people. And I think you and I are actually a little bit opposite, and I'll let you decide.
Okay.
That's true. Right. When you're going to make this transition, you're probably either a wow person or how person. Right. And so I'm a wow person. I'm like, oh, cool. That sounds like a great idea. Let's go do it. And I just kind of figure it out as I go. There's other people who are like, man, I could never do that. They're more of like a how person. They go, okay, this sounds kind of cool, but how am I going to do that? And they need to figure out the pieces first before they'll kind of make that jump. There's no right or wrong there, but you have to know that they both also come with some severe blind spots.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're the how person, a lot of times analysis paralysis gets in the way and you just don't ever do anything. Right? It's just you spin your wheels and you're like, just get stuck thinking about all the hows and then all the problems that could happen.
Yeah.
On the wild side, sometimes you're just like, literally the idea of jumping and building your wings on the way down, like you're just, could be a disaster if you don't have some idea. So
yeah, I would have to say, actually, I am more like you. And the way I usually present this has to do with this one instrument that I use called the Colby Index. And we may have talked about this in the past, but I'm what they call a quick start. So I only need a couple points to sort of verify, a couple data points to verify direction, and I'm all in. Versus the other style, which is predominant style in technology and science, is a fact finder. And a fact finder needs to have not just how, but needs to have enough data to reduce risk. And there's never enough data. So the tension is that when I'm interacting with the fact finders, they always want more and they're not ready to take an action. There's always one more thing they need before they think they need to take action. So the blind spot for them is they never take action. The blind spot for myself and maybe for you is you might get your knees bloodied because you're willing to jump and build your wings. And sometimes the wings don't unfoil the way they're supposed to.
No.
At the end of the day, finding a balance or finding other people on your team to complement you, I think is really helpful. But that dynamic, I can't tell you how many times I run into that. And actually, it brings to mind something I think we chatted about before, and that is you interviewed Seth Godin. And I think it was this time that you interviewed him. He was taking questions from the floor, and someone was asking a question, and there was this long pause, and he just said, "You're stalling." And it was this idea that this individual would never have enough data or facts or comfort level before they were willing to take an action. And I just thought that was kind of a brilliant statement for him to make. And I think it kind of speaks to, so you get into this all the time because people approach you, maybe they come initially, at least to your social sites to, they've heard of a tool or they know they need to get something so they can do what they think in a vague sense they want to do. And then they arrive. So I imagine you get into this territory quite a bit.
Yeah, we do. And for those people that want more data, I say, here's an idea. Why don't you do something with your own data? Measure your data. Stop measuring other people's data. Like the number one scoreboard is revenue. So why don't you start making some money and you can measure that? And they're like, oh my gosh, what a great idea. I'm like, yes, it is.
So if we could, let's pivot again. I'm just curious, once you were out on your own, was there another point in time that you could point to, and I don't know, just throwing this out there live, point to where you pick something up, maybe from one of your mentors? You have got some real gold plate mentors that you've been partnering with that really helps you sort of kick the turbo in on your business. Probably quite a few moments, but
Yeah, there was a ton of stuff that I got, but I think actually the challenge was there's a lot there. It's like, how do you stay congruent with what it is you were trying to do and stay on your path for what you want? And so I have some of these really great people. I'm not going to name drop, but yes, I can reach out to them and have some good conversations if I need to. But a lot of the stuff I get on a daily basis comes from podcasts and books and things like that. And I think, while I'm staying in the hunt and I'm doing my own thing, but I also consult with people and coach people. And so the people that look to me for advice, their problems are kind of top of mind. And the situations I have are kind of top of mind, that I'm listening to these books and listening to podcasts. And pretty much a few times a week, things jump out at me. And I go like, oh, well, wow. And it's hard to
pick one out,
chase those things down. Yeah. It's like shiny object syndrome. But what I do is I say, okay, and I just kind of put them somewhere where I can look at them. Like in the corporate world, they call it a parking lot. Park it over in this Trello. I use Trello for a lot of my stuff. And I just put over this idea and I go, oh, okay, maybe this is going to, be the solution for somebody somewhere, somehow. And maybe I'll be able to apply it. So I just kind of put it over there to get it out of my head. And as I'm getting a little bit older, I'm starting to forget things like the second I think them. So I got to jot them down some.
Let go there.
Because I'm an idea machine. Like they come and they come and they come. And like, I have an idea and I'll be like, whoa, and then I'll have another one. And I will have forgotten that last one. Like totally.
So that's really interesting, because going back to wiring and, quick starts, idea machines, distraction can be a problem. So your model that you put forward this a few minutes ago is a structural system that keeps you ultimately focused on your end game and your end goal. And yes, I'm sure you refresh it at least annually, maybe more often, but that is something that you've built probably habit patterns around, to use the old Atomic Habits, wonderful book, habit patterns around to keep you from going way off on a bunny trail and spinning your wheels too much.
Yeah, because the original question you asked me was like, did I get some good advice or was there something that jumped out at me? And a lot of times it's just good advice that might not be appropriate for me at the time. But I know it's good advice, and you have to be able to discern it's not either good advice for me now or my exact situation, but maybe it'll be good for me later. And frankly, this is a strange one. You didn't ask me this question, but maybe push them back a little bit on your mentors. So I, have a relationship with Dean Graziosi, who's pretty well known and has some stuff going on. And I had a conversation with him one time. And, he wants to grow like this $1 billion empire and just help all 8 million people on the planet. Like he's got these really grand plans. And I was saying to him, Dean, I don't really want that. I want to have more of like a lifestyle business where I can just kind of help people when I want on my own terms. And to me, I just want to be able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, and not have to worry about really anything else. That's kind of what I'm shooting for. And he's like, man, that's not a problem. There's nothing like, that's cool. Like, that's cool that you want to do. As long as you know that's what you want to do, stay focused on that. And so we had a really good conversation around how do I apply some of the stuff that you're suggesting in a place where I don't want to scale that big. To me, that's like a headache. I don't want that. Like, I want to try to be like, this sounds bad, but I can't think of a better way to say it. I want to be like the laziest, most successful person. And by laziest, I mean like putting systems and tools and automation in place where, I basically just have to show up and stay in my skill set and really do that, which doesn't feel like work, right? It's like, oh, okay. And then when it's done, just the automations kind of do their thing and I might just have to spot check it a little bit later. So that's really been kind of the struggle, the shiny object syndrome of all the advice, because you could get so much really good advice. But here's what I'll say, which you didn't ask me this, but I think one of the biggest problems that people get when they're trying to make a big transition, which I know is what the focus of this podcast is they ask blind people to proofread their vision.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's your tweetable moment right there. They ask blind people to proofread their vision. And, I talked about my VS4T thing before. So vision is the first one. What is your big overarching vision of what you're trying to do? And if nobody else in your current friend group or your family has done something like that, and you ask them, hey, I think I'm going to go do this. What do you think? What? And do you think they're going to say? Just like me when I left corporate America, you're going to do what? You're insane. Right? So you're asking, quote, blind people who don't understand your vision, can't see your vision, don't have the vision. You're asking them for advice and strategy. And in this case, talking about Dean is what made me think of it. When I explained to Dean what I was looking to do, what my things were, it changed. Like with the stuff he was talking about changed. Now, not totally, but he's like, okay, so if that's what you want to do, then you might want to look at this or focus on this, or figure out how you can automate and systematize and whatever, outsource as much as you can so you could run your business from a beach if you want.
That's great.
Yeah. As you're going out on this journey, those of you that are listening, just be smart about who you share those things with. You probably want to share your vision and your ideas with people that can already handle big ideas, because here's your other tweetable moment. Big ideas don't fit well in small minds.
There you go. I love it.
And I'm not saying like your friends are small-minded in your family, but like if they're not big thinkers, if they're used to just being in corporate America, doing their thing, working their 9 to 5, just tolerating their existence, when you have a big idea and you share it with somebody like that, they can't even begin to wrap their head around it. And so you got to find other people that you can kind of share those things with.
That's really good. And that's a mistake that I think I fell into over the years, and a lot of people fall into it. It's natural. You go with the flow, you go with your community, you go what's closest to you. And so that's the people you ask, and you don't think about who are you asking and for what advice, what verification. The other thing I would say is that a lot of people in their careers may be frustrated that they're not moving forward enough, or it's just not making them happy or joyful. And they don't know why, because they have all this conditioning that says, you should be so happy. Like you said, you were making a great salary in pharmaceutical sales, right? You had all the extra benefits. Yeah, it was good, but it wasn't really lighting you up. And so if you went and turned to the people who were in that community and asked them, they're going to repeat the same mantra of people who are in that community. And they're going to say, what are you thinking? Look how, it's just the echo chamber of what's not solving your problem, what's not serving you. And so I think that you have to, you got to go deep and have these conversations with yourself, do that work internally, and be okay taking a different path. Be smart about it. I mean, I think there are some people who just say, oh, this isn't made for me anymore, and I'm just going to, without any preparation for any thought or anything. Maybe there's some people listening in now that really want to do what you do, Dave, and they're just like, okay, I'm going to jump out and do it. And they haven't done any homework, any of that preliminary work. And that can be a dangerous thing too. But absolutely make sure you're thinking very intentionally about who you're asking for this kind of external validation. I think that's huge.
And even when you get on the path and you think you're around people like that, I had a situation. It was during this Simon Sinek Start With Why thing that we were, piloting. And the guy that I was partnered with, I kept talking about I want to do this thing. I want to call it Unleash the Awesome. And I want to just be like, bah. And he was a little more conservative. He's like, I don't know. I don't really like that. Makes me think of skateboarding people or something. And I was like, man, really? And I was like, I guess I should do that. But then I thought about it. It was a couple of days before we got together to work in pairs again. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to do that just because he doesn't like it.
Doesn't mean
so. So you have to make sure your own heart and mind are aligned with what you're trying to do. And then, as you're looking for this external help and getting around people that are on the path, also know that, but just like with Dean, having a little bit of pushback, or I'm like, no, I don't really want to, that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard for other people to give you advice or give you guidance or give you mentorship if you're not clear about what your boundaries are, what your goals are, what you're trying to do. And so this can be a really delicate thing. And that's why this whole conversation for, 30 plus minutes now has really been about mindset stuff.
It really is.
If you don't get it locked on and continually stay attuned to what's happening with your own mind and what you're trying to do, you can just be all over the place and not chasing down the thing that you're trying to get after. And that's what I see a lot from people is just, if they start doing something, they forget about why they were doing it. And then they see something else and they're like, oh, let's go do that now. I'm like, well, what about this other thing? We're going to go do this now. I'm like, man, some of you are pivoting more than a top. You're making me dizzy.
And that takes a lot for someone who's wired to jump out of the airplane, right?
Yeah. Yeah. At some point, you got to stick around long enough for some of this stuff to work. It's not overnight. It does take, it's not going to be easy. It takes work. It takes effort. Yes, there's plenty of days and nights where I either stayed up awake or literally I remember days where I just laid in the fetal position in bed, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did this, or I'm so scared or whatever. And just had to be like, okay, dude, all right, let's snap out of it now. Let's go do something and let's get back on the path. Let's go do, like, there's plenty of failures and things that got in the way, but my why, my purpose, my thing was big enough. Because I think what happens on this journey, this transition, is your passion will push you to your point. Like some people will just leave, right? And if you're going to leave, make sure you're running to something. You're not running from something.
Yeah.
But as you're doing that, your passion is going to push you until your purpose pulls, right? And if you don't know what your purpose is, then you'll get pushed because you're like, oh, this is so exciting. And then you go to this new thing and you go, oh man, I have to learn something new. Ugh, this is frustrating. And then you just revert to your comfort zone, right? Or if you know what your purpose is, if you know your why, if you know why you started this thing in the first place, then you'll stay after it.
Yeah, that's great. Those are some gems right there. I knew you'd bring them. The other thing that you mentioned, I just want to swing back to when you were talking about seeing all these other things, you know, the different podcasts you sample, books you read, and then maybe a nugget or a thought wasn't what you needed right then, or content may not be something you would share with your tribe right away. You had a practice of digitally filing that away. Yeah. And I think that's a great practice. You know, John Maxwell he's written over 100 books now, isn't he? Or something like that.
Yep.
And I remember him telling us, we're both in that Maxwell community. And I remember him telling us that he started early and back in the day clipping, and I think he still does do a lot of this on paper, and has a filing system. And he may not, later on he has an idea to write a book about a certain topic, and then he has them all tagged in a manual sense and pulls them all together. And that's a great practice to have.
Yeah, he used to laminate them.
That's right.
He does work off an iPad now, though. He puts a lot of his stuff in there. Yeah, I mean, for me, I've gone for different things. I used Evernote for a while. Honestly, I use Evernote a fair amount, but the Trello for me is a tool that became pretty good for me because the app is easy to use on the phone. And the reason why I like doing it digitally is that if I ever need to outsource this or I ever need to find it and I'm like not around my own stuff, like if I write it in a physical journal and it's sitting over there on my bookshelf and I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and my house it's not very helpful. So when I figure out ways to put it in places where I know I can go find it if I need to, right? Those things have evolved over time. But one of the most profound things that I learned from Tim Ferriss, I talk about him a lot on my own podcast. He wrote The 4 Hour Workweek and a bunch of other books, Tribe of Mentors, Tools of Titans. He's got a great podcast. I highly recommend it. He taught me years ago, he's like, did you know that you can highlight the books that you read in Kindle? I'm like, yeah, okay, duh, Tim, I know that. He said, no, but if you go to your Kindle or your Amazon account, you can see all of the highlights of all of the books that you've ever had in Kindle. And what he did is then he took them and he put them in an Evernote file, and then he could just, search them and do whatever. And I was like, that's pretty
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like how many times you highlight something in a book or write something in the margin, and again, that book is home on your bookshelf, and you're out taking a walk around the neighborhood or something. You're like, whoa, I have an idea. For me, I have my phone with me everywhere. I just go, okay, let me look it up. And then I can annotate it. And if I need to, I can move it into a Trello board to like take action on later if I want to.
That's awesome. Okay, let's pivot again and let's just kind of wrap up. And if you were to summarize, lots of times I ask, what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self? But we don't need to do that. If you were to summarize key lessons learned, just kind of go back over this conversation, and if there's anything missing that you would want to bring forward for someone who's looking to take a transition, maybe more specifically going into their own business or something like that, what would you say?
Know who you are, know who you're not, and work on the skills that can take you to the next level. Well, work on those skills that you're good at and make them world-class. And if you have issues, unless those weaknesses are something that are going to hold you back. So I think that you clearly need to know how to communicate with people in the written word, doing this kind of stuff. You need to work on that some way, somehow. Maybe it's not on video. Maybe it's just on audio. Maybe it's in the written word, whatever, but you have to figure out how to communicate. And I think the more you work on those things, the more you're working on yourself and your skills. And those things are all transferable to whatever niche you're going to go work in. And I think once you learn how to communicate, do that well, that helps you network a little bit better because you can explain what it is you're trying to do and how you can help people and how you can, help other people you meet and connect with other people, those kind of things. So I think those are the biggest things. For my kids, I have 3 boys. One's out of college, one's going to graduate in a couple months, and then I have one in high school. He's a junior. But for the academic side of things, when they're in high school, my wife mostly took that. She was like the really book smart person, did really well. She's got her doctorate, right? So we figured out, okay, talk about knowing your skill set. She's like, okay, I'm going to help do the scheduling for the boys in their high school when they're picking their electives and their courses and all that stuff. I'm like, that's a great idea. And when they have problems with their homework, they go to mom, right? They know what's up. Unless it's marketing or psychology or something, then they come to me. But the only non-negotiable requirement I had with all 3 of my boys, I said, you must, as an elective in your freshman year, take public speaking, period. Yeah. And they were like, I won't do that. And every single one of them will tell you to this day, that is the best thing that they ever did in high school, because as they even went through their own high school career, there were plenty of times where they were given the opportunity to do a group project or do a presentation. And they're like, I'm going to do a presentation. That's easy. Most people are afraid of speaking in front of people, but that's a skill that I knew they would need. And, I learned this from Warren Buffett. If you ask Warren Buffett what the best investment he ever made was, it's not a stock. It's not a real estate investment. It's a Dale Carnegie public speaking course.
Wow.
That was like probably $100. And so when I heard that, I was like, wow, that guy's pretty successful. Maybe I should model that. And so I worked on public speaking. I did Toastmasters. I did the John Maxwell thing, working on public speaking. I've done some other things to work on this craft, because it doesn't matter how good your idea is. It doesn't matter how great your product is. If you can't tell people about it and market it, it's not going to sell.
Yeah.
And I would give you the example of McDonald's. You can't tell me that McDonald's makes the tastiest hamburgers in the world, but they sure do sell a lot of them. And it's all because of their marketing machine. So the people, you asked me the question about the people who are making this transition. Your idea could be the greatest idea ever, but if you can't figure out a way to communicate it to the world, it does not matter. I mean, you can watch Shark Tank, right? These people that go on Shark Tank, they might have really good ideas and they just can't.
Yeah, they cave.
Why? Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Work on your communication skills and your psychology and your marketing skills. That will help you.
That's great stuff. Thank you so much. And hey, listen, let's take a few minutes, because by this point, I think people are probably really interested in maybe getting a hold of you or getting into your community, because you share so much of this. I mean, multiple times a day, folks. Dave's out there. Tell us now a little bit about your stuff and how people can reach you.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Joe.
You bet.
If you want to do a deeper dive on the mindset stuff, my podcast called Unleash the Awesome.
Welcome to Unleash the Awesome with Dave.
That's where I spend a fair amount of time talking about this stuff and the psychology. And I've had some good guests on there from marketing and psychology background, including Dr. Robert Cialdini, who is the father of influence, right? So I would check out my podcast if you're into that. If you want to work on the digital marketing side and you want some help with tools and things like that, I do have a Facebook group called Digital Marketing Mentorship with Dave Gambrill. And then I do have a thing called Tech Tools Tuesday. It's like an email list thing where I send out a blast almost every Tuesday. I'd say maybe 45 Tuesdays out of the year, where I talk about some of these tools that I've come across or that my colleagues are using or some of my coaching clients that are really making a difference in our business. And for a lot of you that are transitioning, you need to find some of these tools that will help you automate some of the systems and processes and whatever. And if you find the right tool and you put it to place in your business, it frees up a bunch of hours in your week to do other things that you would rather be doing. So if you go to Gambrill.com, which is my website, but Gambrill.com/TTT for Tech Tools Tuesday, you can opt into that and you'll get the next one when it comes out on Tuesday.
And they're great. I am definitely opted in. I do get that list and look at those suggestions very, very often. All these links I'll put into the show notes so you guys can get to Dave and his offerings that much quicker. Dave, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate the relationship as well and how you've helped me. Thanks again for being on Titans of Transition. You certainly are a Titan, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Joe. This has been fun.
Hey, thanks for joining me today on Titans of Transition. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please check the show notes for additional information. Also, please like and subscribe to this channel.